The ship Aurora floated in the middle of the dark stretch of space where stars seemed weaker, their light swallowed by a strange veil. The vessel was small compared to great human fleets, but to its crew, it was a home filled with duty, courage, and hope. They were explorers, chosen to cross uncharted regions and bring back knowledge of what lay beyond the maps. Captain Myra stood on the bridge, her hands resting on the railing as her sharp eyes scanned the view screen. She was calm, but her mind was alert. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her uniform carried the simple marks of leadership. Around her, the bridge was alive with quiet movement. Panels glowed faintly, voices whispered reports, and the hum of the engines gave comfort like a heartbeat. Yet something about this region was not right. The stars here looked dim, as though their shine was stolen. The void seemed heavier, pressing against the ship's hull like a silent force. Crew members shifted uneasily in their seats, exchanging nervous glances. Even those who had traveled far and seen wonders felt unsettled. Myra finally spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and strong. "Keep scanning. Record everything. This sector is different, and I want every detail saved." "Yes, Captain," answered Tomasz, the chief engineer. He was broad-shouldered, with hands rough from years of work. His console flickered as streams of data rolled across the screen. His brow furrowed. "Strange static here. Instruments are picking up interference." The crew leaned closer to their stations. Static was common in deep space, but this was not ordinary. It came in pulses, like a weak rhythm, almost like a beat. The more Tomasz adjusted the filters, the clearer it became. "I do not like this," whispered Lena, the navigator. Her eyes moved nervously across the star charts. "There is nothing in records about this place, but the void feels alive." Myra heard the fear in her voice but did not let it spread. "Fear belongs to the unknown. Once we learn, there will be no fear. Keep working." Minutes passed, then an hour. The static did not vanish. Instead, it grew stranger. Among the broken signals, the crew began to hear something else. It was faint, buried under the noise, but it was not random. It was a sound that seemed shaped, as if carrying meaning. Tomasz froze, his eyes wide. "Captain, listen to this." He tapped a control, and the bridge filled with the faintest of sounds. At first, it was unclear. A thin, stretched tone carried across the speakers. Then it cracked into fragments. The crew leaned closer, holding their breath. It was not a machine. It was not a star. It was a voice. The bridge fell silent. The voice was faint, broken by time and distance, but it was unmistakable. It rose like a soft cry, a plea that came from somewhere deep in the void. "Is that a human?" Lena whispered. Her eyes filled with disbelief. "No," another crew member said quickly. "It cannot be. No human settlement exists here." But Tomasz shook his head. "The patterns are human. Old, but human. This is no accident. Someone is speaking, or was speaking, from somewhere in the sector." The crew looked at Myra. For a moment, the weight of command pressed heavier than ever on her shoulders. She felt her own heart tremble, but she did not let it show. She stood taller, her eyes steady. "Plot the course," she said. "We will follow the signal." A silence followed her order, but no one questioned it. Humanity had always chased the unknown. That was their strength, their stubborn nature. To turn away from a cry in the dark was not an option. The Aurora adjusted its heading. Engines roared softly, pushing the vessel forward into the shadowed region. As the ship moved deeper, the cry became stronger. The voice still cracked with distance, but now there were moments when words could almost be heard. The crew gathered in the central hall after their shift. Whispers filled the room. Some were afraid. Others were curious. Some believed it might be a trap, a trick from alien machines designed to lure explorers. But others believed in something greater. Perhaps this was proof of a human past long forgotten, a lost story waiting to be found. Myra entered the hall, and the room grew quiet. She looked at her people, 30 souls bound together in this mission. You are thinking of many things, she said gently. Fear, wonder, doubt. All are natural. But remember why we are here. Humanity must not turn away from a voice calling in the dark. If there is danger, we will face it together. If there is truth, we will bring it home. We are explorers. This is what we are meant to do. Her words settled the crew. Some smiled faintly, others sat straighter. The doubt did not vanish, but their hearts grew steadier. Myra had given them something stronger than fear. She had given them purpose. The ship pressed onward. Hours passed, then days. The signal remained, guiding them like a thread through the void. The stars around them seemed colder, the silence deeper, but the voice never faded. At times, the cry was soft, like a child's whisper. At other times, it stretched into a wail of sorrow. Tomasz spent sleepless nights at his console, adjusting filters, working with old Earth languages stored in the ship's memory. He believed the words belonged to a tongue from centuries past. The crew often gathered near his station, waiting for news, listening to fragments that slipped through the static. One night, Myra walked into the bridge and found Tomasz staring at the screen with tired eyes. She stepped beside him. "Anything new?" she asked. He rubbed his face and shook his head. "Not yet. But I feel close. Every time I clear a fragment, I hear more. It is human, Captain. I would bet my life on it." Myra placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we will keep going until we find the source." And so, the Aurora moved forward into the uncharted dark, carrying 30 humans bound by courage and hope. Somewhere ahead, the first cry in darkness waited for them. The crew did not yet know what truth they would uncover. They only knew that they had heard something no one else had heard for centuries. A voice lost in time, reaching across the void, had touched them. And that was enough to push them onward, deeper into the silence, toward the beginning of a story that would change everything. The Aurora sailed deeper into the uncharted stretch, her hull glowing faintly against the distant stars. The voice in the static had become the center of every thought, every whisper, and every hope aboard. It was not just a sound anymore. It was a question, one that pulled the crew forward, one that none of them could ignore. On the bridge, Tomasz leaned close to his console. His fingers moved quickly, adjusting filters, layering one frequency on another. He had not rested well in days, yet his eyes burned with determination. Each shift of the signal brought him closer. The crew had gathered in silence, listening through the speakers. The faint sound was still broken, weak, and stretched across time, but now fragments began to form. It was no longer just a cry. It was words. "Help, still here, lost," the crew stiffened. For a long moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of machines. They had all heard it. Human words, even if broken, reaching them from the darkness. Lena clutched the edge of her console. It cannot be real. No human colony was ever marked in this sector. It makes no sense. Myra's eyes stayed on the view screen. Sense or not, the voice is here. And it is our duty to find it. Tomasz looked up at her. His face was tired but his voice carried strength. "Captain, the language is very old. Older than any colony we know about. It matches records from Earth more than 400 years ago. Whoever sent this, they were speaking a tongue long forgotten in space." The crew shifted uneasily. If the words were that old, how could they still be alive? "Could it be a trick?" asked one of the younger crew members, Ryan. His eyes darted nervously. "An alien machine designed to lure us in." Myra turned to him, her expression firm but kind. Even if it were, we would still face it? Humanity does not run from voices in the dark. We seek the truth. That is our way. Her words steadied them again. No one argued further. The signal grew clearer as the aurora pushed deeper into the sector. Long hours passed, and with every shift, more fragments came through. Once proud, still waiting, please, the voices were not only of one person. At times they were male, other times female, sometimes even the faint sound of a child. Layered together, they painted a picture of many souls calling at once. Lena whispered, "It sounds like a whole colony crying together." Tomasz shook his head. Voices cannot survive for centuries without machines. Something kept them alive. That thought brought silence. If machines had carried these voices, then what machines were they? And why had no explorer found them before? The aurora approached a star system, its sun dim and weak. The third planet glowed faintly, its surface scarred with deep gray lines. Sensors reported no life, no strong energy. Only the signal, steady and haunting, rising from beneath the surface. Myra stood at the center of the bridge. This is it. This world holds the voice. The ship slowed, orbiting above the planet. Through the view screen, the crew saw endless plains of ash, jagged mountains, and seas frozen in silence. No green, no blue, no light. The planet was dead. But still, the voice called. The crew could not look away. To them, it felt as though the whole world was a tomb, yet the dead refused to stay silent. Tomasz turned from his console. "Captain, I believe the source is underground. There must be some machine still alive down there, even after all these years." Lena frowned. How could a machine last this long? Centuries should have destroyed it. No ordinary machine, Tomasz answered. Something built to endure. Myra placed her hands on the railing. Her voice was steady. "Prepare the landing party. We go down." The crew moved quickly. Suits were checked, scanners prepared, and a shuttle readied in the hangar bay. Despite fear, their hearts carried fire. They were explorers, and before them lay the chance to uncover a truth lost to history. When the shuttle detached from the aurora, the crew watched from above as it pierced the atmosphere. Fire streaked around the vessel, but soon the flames vanished, leaving only the gray world below. Myra guided the shuttle toward the source of the signal. They passed over ruined towers, half buried under layers of ash and rock. Shapes of broken cities stretched across the land, their skeletons silent reminders of a time when life had thrived here. The crew stared out the windows. No one spoke. Finally, Tomasz whispered, "They lived here. Humans lived here." The shuttle touched down near the ruins. Dust rose into the air and settled again in silence. The crew stepped out, their boots sinking into soft ash. The air was thin, poisoned by centuries of decay. Their helmets sealed tightly as they began their search. Scanners guided them to a collapsed plaza. Beneath the broken stones, a faint hollow echoed. They cleared debris until an entrance was revealed, a wide tunnel leading into darkness. The signal pulsed stronger from within. Myra stood at the front, her light cutting through the black. "Stay close. We go together." The crew descended. The tunnel walls were smooth in some places, jagged in others. Strange marks were etched into the stone, half erased by time but still faintly visible. They moved deeper, and the voice grew louder. Sometimes it sounded like crying. Other times like singing. The sound filled the tunnel, wrapping around them, pressing into their hearts. Tomasz whispered into the calm, "It feels like they are still here with us." Myra's jaw tightened. She did not answer. She only led them forward. At last, the tunnel opened into a massive chamber. The crew gasped. The walls glowed faintly, covered in crystals that caught their lights and spread them like stars. At the center stood a machine, tall and strange, its shape unlike anything built by modern hands. It still hummed, weak but steady. And from it, the voices poured. The crew froze, hearts pounding, as they realized they were standing before the very source of the first cry in darkness. The chamber echoed with the faint hum of the ancient machine. The glow of the crystals painted the walls in shifting light, and the voices carried through the air like whispers of ghosts. Myra stood at the center, her eyes fixed on the device that had endured centuries of silence. The machine was built of metal that shimmered strangely in the light, its surface smooth in some places but scarred in others. Cables and conduits reached into the floor, vanishing into the earth. At the heart of the device, a core pulsed with weak energy, releasing the cries. The voices rose and fell, fragments of sorrow, hope, and pleading. Some were so clear that the crew felt as if people stood right beside them. A child's laughter slipped through the static. A woman's desperate call followed. Then, silence, broken again by another voice. Lena's hands trembled. It feels alive. Tomasz crouched by the machine, studying its base. His scanner flickered as he moved it across the surface. This is human design, but altered. It looks like something our ancestors made, but there are additions that are not familiar. Someone improved it, or rebuilt it? Are you saying humans lived here? Myra asked. Tomasz nodded slowly. Yes. This planet was theirs. A colony, long ago. The ruins above prove it, and this machine confirms it. The crew exchanged glances. The truth was heavy. No records spoke of this world, no history told of its people. Yet here, beneath the dead surface, their voices still cried. Ryan whispered, his voice shaking. If they were here, what happened to them? Why is this world empty now? Myra did not answer. She stepped closer to the machine. Carved into the stone floor were markings, faded but visible. She knelt, brushing away the dust. Symbols formed a pattern, circles and lines weaving together. They looked like a record, a message left behind. Tomasz, she called. Can you read this? He joined her, kneeling beside the marks. His eyes narrowed as he compared them with old records on his tablet. This is old Earth script. Very old. The language of settlers who left centuries ago. They must have carved their story here. The crew gathered around as Tomasz translated slowly. The words came broken, but their meaning was clear. Here we stood, far from home, we built, we dreamed, we fell. The crew listened in silence. Each word weighed on their hearts. They wanted someone to know, Tomasz continued. They wanted their struggle remembered. This machine is not only a recorder. It is a cry for memory. They did not want to vanish into the dark. Lena's voice cracked as she whispered, but they did vanish. The chamber fell into silence again, broken only by the endless voices. Myra stood tall, her face firm. Not completely. We are here. We heard them. Their cry was not lost. Her words gave the crew strength, but the sorrow did not leave their eyes. They explored the chamber further. Crystals lined the walls like veins, carrying faint energy. Some had cracked, others still glowed. At the far end, they found broken machines, their pieces scattered across the floor. They looked like defenses, perhaps weapons, destroyed in a final effort. Tomasz examined one of the fragments. They were attacked. This was no natural disaster. Someone or something came here and destroyed them. The crew grew tense. If an enemy had struck this colony, could they still exist? Could they still be out there, hidden in the shadows of space? Myra's voice cut through their fear. Do not let your thoughts run wild. Whoever struck them is gone now. What matters is that these people lived, and they must be remembered. They returned to the machine. Tomasz connected his scanner directly to its core. Streams of data appeared, filled with broken logs, names, fragments of daily life. Voices spoke of farms, families, dreams of building a world far from Earth. Then the logs shifted into fear warnings of ships appearing in the skies, strange lights, sudden attacks. One final message repeated again and again. Remember us. Do not forget. The crew's faces grew pale. Myra spoke with quiet strength. We will not forget. They worked together to stabilize the machine. Tomasz repaired damaged conduits, while Lena rerouted power from portable cells. Slowly, the core grew brighter, and the voices grew stronger, clearer. For the first time, full sentences emerged without distortion. We fought until the last, our children cried, our homes burned, we send this into the dark so that someone will know we lived. The chamber shook with the weight of those words. The crew bowed their heads, each of them feeling the sorrow of a people lost to time. Yet there was pride, too. These colonists had not surrendered to silence. They had left behind a mark, a cry that carried across the ages. They had given humanity a gift, even in their fall. Lena finally spoke. Captain, what will we do with this? Myra looked at her crew, at the faces filled with fear, sadness, and determination. We will carry it. We will send their voices to the stars again. No longer will they be hidden here. The galaxy will know their story. Her words ignited fire in their hearts. The sorrow turned into purpose. They spent hours copying the data, gathering every fragment, every voice, every carved word. When they returned to the surface, the dead world no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a monument. From orbit, the Aurora looked down at the gray planet. Its surface was still scarred, its skies still dead, but now the crew saw it differently. It was not only a grave. It was a message, a place where humanity had once stood proud, even in the face of loss. On the bridge, Tomasz transmitted the voices to the ship's memory banks. The sound filled the halls of the Aurora, echoing through every corridor. Crew members paused at their stations, listening with heavy hearts. Myra stood in silence, her eyes on the view screen. We have found a dead system. But it has given us more than sorrow. It has given us a reminder of who we are. Humanity does not vanish. Humanity leaves a mark. The crew nodded, their eyes shining with both tears and pride. The Aurora prepared to leave orbit. The dead system was silent once more, but its cry now lived in the hearts of 30 humans, ready to carry it beyond the shadows, into the light of the stars. The Aurora circled above the dead planet, its engines humming softly as the crew prepared for the next step. They had uncovered the truth of a lost colony, but questions still pressed against their minds. Who had attacked this world? Why had the colonists been forgotten? And what lay deeper beneath the surface, where the cries had first awakened? Captain Myra stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the gray sphere below. The memory of the chamber still echoed within her. The crystals, the machine, and the endless voices had left a weight on her heart. But she also felt a fire. Those people had refused to be erased, and now it was her duty to follow where their story led. She turned to her crew. The voices guided us this far. They call from below the ruins, deeper than we have gone. We cannot stop here. We descend. The crew nodded, their faces set with quiet resolve. They knew the risks. The tunnels could collapse. Unknown machines could stir. Yet none of them spoke against her order. Tomasz, his hands blackened from repairing the ancient machine, adjusted the scanners. Captain, I traced the signal beyond the chamber. It runs through a network of tunnels. Something is buried deep below. That is where the true source lies. Then that is where we go, Myra said. The shuttle carried the landing team back to the surface. Dust swirled around them as they set down near the ruins. The gray sky pressed heavy above, and silence stretched across the land. Once, children had played here, families had built homes, and cities had risen. Now only stone and ash remained. The crew carried lights, scanners, and supplies. They wore their sealed suits, the air around them too thin and poisoned for breath. Myra led them to the entrance they had uncovered before, the tunnel carved into the earth. One by one, they stepped inside. The light from their helmets cut into the dark. The walls closed around them, damp with age, cracked by time. Their footsteps echoed faintly, mingling with the faint cry that guided them. Deeper they went, following the signal. The air grew heavier, though their suits protected them. The silence pressed harder, broken only by the sound of their breathing and the endless cry. Ryan whispered into the calm, his voice uneasy. "It feels like the planet is alive. Like it remembers what happened here." Myra answered firmly. "It is not the planet. It is the people who once lived here. We carry their memory now." The tunnels twisted downward, sometimes wide enough for them to walk side by side, sometimes narrowing until they had to squeeze through. Strange marks lined the walls, symbols half carved, half erased. Some showed shapes of people standing together, others showed ships in the sky. The crew studied them as they moved, each mark telling fragments of a forgotten story. At last, the tunnel widened into a deep shaft. A stairway spiraled downward, carved from the rock itself. The team shone their lights, revealing more carvings along the walls. Tomasz ran his gloved fingers across one. These were not just colonists. They were builders. They carved their history into the very bones of this world. The stairway carried them deeper and deeper, until the walls opened into another vast chamber. This one was larger than the first, stretching so far their lights barely reached the edges. Crystals lined the ceiling like stars, glowing faintly. At the center stood another machine, far greater than the one above. Its structure was immense, with pillars rising around it like guardians. The core at its heart pulsed with dim light, but stronger than the chamber above. And the voices poured from it, filling the chamber with a chorus of sorrow. The crew froze. Lena's breath caught in her throat. "It sounds like thousands." Indeed, the cries were no longer scattered fragments. They were a storm of voices, overlapping, rising and falling. Men and women, young and old, speaking in desperation, in anger, in grief. Together they formed a sound that shook the crew to their bones. Tomasz scanned quickly. "This is the central recorder." The machine above was only a fragment, an echo. "This is where the colony stored everything." The voices shifted. Words broke through clearly now. "We fought, we fell, they came from the skies, we held until the end." The crew listened in silence, each word piercing them deeper. Myra stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the core. They were attacked. Their enemy destroyed their world, but could not destroy their story. "They left this behind for us." Ryan's voice trembled. "But who attacked them? And why? What if those attackers are still out there?" No one answered. Fear pressed against them, but so did duty. They circled the machine, examining its structure. Strange metal supported it, stronger than anything modern human science could build. Energy still flowed through the veins of the crystals, feeding the core. Tomasz worked to connect his scanner. The screen filled with data, ancient but readable. "There are logs here. Names, records of families, even images. They recorded everything, every moment of their lives, then every moment of their fall." The crew gathered close as broken images appeared on their helmet displays. Children running through fields. Towers rising under twin suns. Families smiling as they worked the land. Then, fire in the sky. Ships descending like shadows. Flashes of destruction. Faces twisted in fear. And then, silence. Lena covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. They wanted someone to see this. To know that they lived, that they loved, and that they fought. Myra's voice carried across the chamber. And now we do. We are the witnesses they waited for. The voices shifted again, as if sensing their presence. The cry grew softer, almost gentle. Words formed clearly now. If you hear us, you are our kin, carry us, remember us. The crew stood in silence, their hearts heavy but filled with fire. They knew their mission had changed. They were no longer just explorers. They were messengers of the forgotten. Myra raised her head. We will carry you. You will not be forgotten. Her words echoed through the chamber, mixing with the voices. For a moment, it felt as if the cries answered, softening, almost at peace. The crew worked for hours, gathering as much data as possible. They copied every log, every voice, every image. The machine was too massive to move, but its memory could be carried. When they finally began their climb back to the surface, the voices still called, but now they carried a different weight. They were no longer cries lost in darkness. They were cries that had been heard. As they emerged into the gray light of the dead world, the crew felt the weight of history upon them. They had descended into sorrow and come back with truth. On the shuttle ride back to the Aurora, silence filled the cabin. Each crew member stared out the window, watching the scarred land below. They did not speak, but their hearts spoke the same vow. They would not let the story vanish. They would carry it to the stars. The shuttle docked with the Aurora, and the crew carried the data from the great machine aboard. The air inside the ship felt different now, as if it carried the weight of thousands of unseen passengers. The cries of the lost colonists were no longer locked in the tunnels of the dead world. They now lived within the memory of the Aurora. Captain Myra stood on the bridge as the recordings played softly across the speakers. The voices were clearer now, strengthened by the data Tomasz had gathered. Some spoke of family meals. Others sang songs of old Earth. Some told of battles, fear, and fire raining from the sky. The voices shifted from joy to despair, forming a chorus that stirred every heart aboard. The crew listened in silence. For a time, they did not feel alone in space. It was as if the ship itself had become a vessel for the dead, carrying their final cries into the stars. Tomasz worked at his console, his fingers moving swiftly as he organized the fragments. Captain, he said, the main machine we found is powerful, but there may be more. The tunnels stretched far beyond what we explored. This may not have been the only chamber. Myra looked at the display, where maps of the underground system flickered. You believe there are others? Yes, Tomasz said firmly. The patterns suggest a network of recorders. The chamber we reached was only the heart. There could be smaller chambers spread across the planet, each carrying different voices. The thought sent a quiet stir through the crew. To discover one voice was powerful. To discover thousands more was overwhelming. Lena, who had grown quiet since their descent, finally spoke. Captain, we should go back down. If there are more chambers, we must find them. If the colony gave us their story, we cannot leave it half told. Myra nodded. Prepare the team. We return. The next descent was harder. The crew returned to the ruins, navigating deeper tunnels branching from the first shaft. The paths were treacherous, some collapsed by time, others scarred by old blasts. Yet the faint hum of energy guided them. Hours passed before they reached another chamber. This one was smaller but no less haunting. Crystals lined the walls in spirals, and at the center stood a machine shaped like an arch. When they approached, the chamber came alive with sound. The voices here were different. They were not cries of despair but echoes of daily life. Children learning to speak. Farmers discussing crops. Songs sung by groups working together. The sound was so clear that the crew felt as if the colonists still stood among them. Lena closed her eyes, listening to the laughter of children. It feels like walking through their lives. Like stepping into their memories. Tomasz studied the machine. This one was built for echoes, not for warning. They wanted their ordinary days remembered as much as their fall. The crew spent hours recording every sound. As they worked, the voices shifted again. This time, the echoes carried messages left behind for the future. Whoever finds this, know we lived with hope, know we built with love. The crew felt the chamber press into their hearts. These were not warriors, not conquerors, but families who had wanted to live, grow, and be remembered. As they prepared to leave, Ryan looked back at the machine. Captain, they knew they would fall. And even then, they chose to send their lives into the future. That is strength. Myra placed her hand on his shoulder. It is the strength of humanity. To face darkness, yet still choose to leave behind light. They pressed on through other tunnels. Some led to chambers filled with broken machines, silent and shattered. Others opened into caverns where crystals had burned out long ago. But a few still glowed, each holding its own chorus of voices. One chamber carried only music. Instruments of old Earth played by colonists who had brought culture across the stars. Another held records of builders discussing their plans, arguing, and laughing as they shaped cities. Another revealed the voices of teachers, reading stories to children. Each chamber was different, but together they formed a greater whole. They were the soul of the colony, preserved through time, carved into the stone of a dead world. The crew returned to the Aurora after long hours of exploration, carrying fragments from every chamber. The ship's systems now held thousands of voices, a collection of human memory that had waited centuries to be found. That night, the crew gathered in the central hall. Tomasz had prepared a playback, layering the recordings into a single flow. The hall filled with the sound of life. Songs rose. Laughter echoed. The cries of the last battle returned, followed by the soft lullabies of mothers. Some of the crew wept openly. Others sat in silence, their hearts too full for words. Myra stood before them, her face calm but her eyes shining with emotion. They wanted us to hear them, she said. Not only their end, but their lives. They wanted us to carry their voices forward. And now we must. These chambers are not tombs. They are echoes of who we are. Her words settled into every heart. The sorrow of the lost colony had become something greater. It was no longer only a story of death. It was a story of life carried across the ages. Tomasz spoke softly. Captain, what will we do with this? Where will we send it? Myra looked out at the stars through the wide window of the hall. Everywhere. To Earth, to the colonies, to every ship that sails the void. No one will forget these people. Their cry will not fade again. The crew rose to their feet, filled with renewed purpose. The mission had changed. They were no longer explorers drifting through shadows. They were guardians of memory, messengers of the past. On the bridge, Myra gave the order. Amplify the signal. Send the voices to the stars. Tomasz pressed the controls, and for the first time in centuries, the voices of the lost colony left their silent world. They stretched into the void, carried on beams of light, touching the stars with their echoes. The galaxy would hear. And in that moment, the chamber of echoes was no longer a place of sorrow. It had become a beacon. The voices spread through the void, carried by the Aurora signal. Across the dark stretch of space, the cry of the lost colony became more than sound. It became a call. The crew of the Aurora felt proud, but also restless. The echoes of the colonists had given them strength, yet one question remained. What had destroyed this world? The recordings spoke of fire from the sky, but the details were unclear. Some voices mentioned ships, others spoke of storms, and some spoke of shadows that moved faster than light. Captain Myra could not leave without learning the truth. The ship drifted above the ruined planet, its lights shining faintly on the broken surface. Myra gathered her officers on the bridge. We have heard their lives, she said. We have carried their voices. but we do not know what killed them. We cannot carry only half the truth. Tomasz leaned forward, his face pale but determined. The machines in the chambers might hold more than voices. They were built by minds far greater than ours. If they could carry memory, they may have carried visions too. Lena frowned. You mean images? Yes, Tomasz answered. If we can unlock the crystals deeper, we may see what they saw. The crew agreed to return one last time. They would face the deepest tunnels, where the oldest machines rested. The descent was harder than before. The air was heavier, the walls colder. Their light swept across strange carvings, marks etched into the stone by human hands. These were not words of joy or daily life. They were warnings. Figures of burning ships. Spirals of flame. Symbols of eyes staring from the dark. Lena whispered, they carved their fear into the walls. Whatever came for them, they wanted us to see it. They reached a chamber unlike the others. It was vast, shaped like a sphere, with crystals set in perfect circles across the walls. At the center stood a tall machine, shaped like a pillar, its surface black as night. When Tomasz touched it, the crystals awoke. Light poured from the walls, forming shapes in the air. The crew gasped as the chamber filled with living images. They saw the colony in its final days. Towers of steel and glass stood proud. Children played in wide courtyards. Farmers brought food to the markets. It was a place of life and hope. Then the sky darkened. Shadows appeared above the colony, ships larger than anything the crew of the Aurora had seen. They were not human ships. Their designs were sharp and cold, without beauty or warmth. Beams of fire rained down, tearing through towers and burning the ground. The voices in the chamber matched the images. The cries of panic, the shouts for help, the final words of mothers and fathers filled the room again. The crew stood frozen as they watched the destruction unfold. Ryan clenched his fists. It was no storm. No accident. They were attacked. Myra's eyes narrowed. And not by anything human. The images shifted again. Colonists gathered in underground halls, rushing to the crystal chambers. Some prayed. Some recorded messages. Others fought with weapons too small to stop the great ships. They knew they could not win. Yet they chose to leave behind their voices, their music, their stories. The last image showed a small group of colonists standing around the central machine. A woman held a child in her arms. She looked into the crystal and spoke. To whoever finds this, know that we lived. Know that we loved. If you hear our voices, do not let them fade. Do not let the ones who silenced us be forgotten. The image faded, leaving the chamber dark once more. The crew stood in silence. The truth weighed heavy on them. This was not only the story of a lost colony. It was the story of a people destroyed by an unknown enemy. Lena broke the silence. Captain, if those ships still exist, then others may fall the same way. Myra nodded. That is why this cannot remain hidden. The voices are not only a cry of memory. They are a warning. They carried the recordings and images back to the Aurora. Tomasz worked through the night, layering sound with vision, shaping the story into one clear message. By the next dawn, the Aurora held the full truth of the colony. When the crew gathered again, Myra spoke. We set out to explore. Instead, we found a burden. The galaxy must know what happened here. The colonists left their cry for us. Now we carry it forward. Ryan's voice was steady. But Captain, if we send this warning, others may come looking. What if the enemy that destroyed this world hears us too? Myra looked out at the stars. Then let them hear. Let them know that humanity remembers. That we are not silent. That we carry the voices of those they tried to erase. The signal was prepared. This time, it was not only sound. It was light, image, and truth. When Tomasz activated the beacon, the stars themselves seemed to shimmer with the cry of the fallen. Across the endless night, the story of the colony flew outward, stronger than ever. The crew watched in silence, knowing their mission was far from over. They had uncovered the forgotten truth. But truth carried weight. Somewhere, beyond the stars, an enemy still existed. And now humanity would know. As the signal spread, Myra gave one final order. Set our course for the nearest colony. We will not carry this burden alone. Let all of humanity hear the cry in the darkness. The engines of the Aurora roared to life, carrying ship and crew away from the dead world. Behind them, the planet lay quiet, but no longer alone. Its voices had been carried into the stars. The forgotten truth had been revealed. And the story of humanity had only just begun. The Aurora moved across the silent void, its engines burning a faint trail of light. Behind it, the ruined planet rested in silence, but its story no longer belonged only to the shadows. The cry of the lost colony had been carried into the galaxy. On the bridge, Captain Myra stood at the front window, her eyes fixed on the endless stars. She could not help but feel both pride and fear. Pride that the voices of the dead now lived again, and fear that the truth they carried might stir forces humanity was not ready to face. Tomasz sat at the console, monitoring the broadcast. Streams of sound and image left the ship, spreading far beyond their reach. The signal is strong, he said quietly. Any listening station, any ship, even deep-range probes, will pick it up. Lena crossed her arms. Then by now, someone has already heard it. They waited. Hours passed, and the Aurora drifted through the dark. Each crew member sat in silence, listening to the faint hum of the ship and the soft crackle of the broadcast as it played over the systems. The voices of the colonists filled the ship again. Laughter, music, stories of simple days, and then the cries of the end. Myra finally broke the silence. Do you think they knew, when they left those words behind? Do you think they believed someone would hear them? Ryan, who had been staring at the stars, answered. They had hope, Captain. That hope reached us. And now it will reach others. The crew wanted to believe that. But doubt lingered. Would the galaxy listen? Or would it turn away from the pain of the past? The answer came sooner than they expected. The ship's long-range receiver lit up with a pulse. A signal. Tomasz's hands flew across the console. Captain, we have an incoming message. It's human, not alien. It comes from the outpost at Vega Station. Put it through, Myra ordered. The speakers filled with static, then cleared. A voice, firm but shaken, spoke. This is Commander Hale of Vega Station. Aurora, we have received your broadcast. Every chamber on the station has gone silent to listen. We hear the voices. We see the truth. That world is no longer forgotten. Your message has reached us. The crew exchanged looks of relief. For the first time since they had descended into the ruins, they felt the weight lift. Someone had heard. Humanity had answered. But the message was not finished. Hale's voice grew harder. The images you sent show an enemy we do not know. These ships are nothing in our records. If what you found is true, then humanity is not alone, and we are not safe. The Council must hear this. Return to Vega Station at once. Your discovery may change everything. The transmission ended. Silence fell on the bridge. Then Ryan whispered, we did it. The voices will live. And now we prepare. Myra turned to her crew. Set course for Vega Station. The journey is not over. It has only begun. The Aurora shifted its path, moving toward the bright line of stars that marked Vega's region. As it traveled, the crew tried to rest, but sleep did not come easily. Each of them carried the images of fire raining from the sky. Lena spent the night at her station, replaying fragments of the colonist's final words. She whispered to herself, "We will not let you fade." Ryan checked the weapon systems again and again, though no enemy was in sight. Tomasz worked on refining the broadcast, shaping it into a stronger signal for Vega and beyond. Myra kept her eyes on the stars, knowing that if unknown ships had destroyed one colony, they might return. Days passed in uneasy quiet. Finally, Vega Station appeared ahead. A ring of light against the dark, filled with human ships and living voices. The Aurora approached, carrying its burden. Docking clamps closed around the ship. As the crew stepped out, officers and workers of the station gathered. They had already heard the cry, and many faces were marked with grief. Others carried determination. The story of the colony had touched them deeply. Commander Hale, a tall man with sharp eyes, greeted Myra. "Captain, you and your crew have done more than you know. You carried voices that would have been lost forever. Humanity owes you." Myra bowed her head. "It is not us you should honor. It is them. We only carried what they left." Hale nodded. "And carry it you did. The council has already been called. They will hear the truth within hours. The galaxy will know what happened." Inside the great hall of the station, screens lit up. The broadcast played once more, this time before the leaders of human colonies. The laughter of children filled the chamber. The music of life echoed. Then came the fire, the screams, the silence. No one spoke until the broadcast ended. Then the council leader rose. His voice was heavy with sorrow. "We have always believed we were alone in this galaxy. We see now that we were wrong. A colony was destroyed not by chance, but by design. An enemy struck at our people, and for years we knew nothing. Thanks to the Aurora, we know the truth." His voice hardened. "We will not allow this to happen again. The voices of the fallen will guide us. We will prepare, we will unite, and we will carry their cry into the stars as both warning and promise." The hall erupted with voices. Some demanded war. Others called for caution. But all agreed on one thing. The colony would not be forgotten. Humanity would answer the cry. Back aboard the Aurora, the crew watched the debate unfold on their screens. They felt both pride and fear once more. Pride that they had given voice to the lost, and fear of what the future would bring. Ryan broke the silence. "If those ships are still out there, then this is only the beginning." Myra placed her hand on the glass, staring into the vast dark beyond Vega Station. "Yes. The beginning of something greater than us. The cry we carried was not only memory. It was a spark. And now that spark has reached the stars." The crew stood together, side by side, as the stars beyond seemed to grow brighter. The colony's voices had crossed the silence of space. Humanity had heard. Humanity had answered. And somewhere, far away, in the uncharted depths of the galaxy, other ears might have heard as well. The first cry in darkness had become a voice among the stars.